If you grew up in the 1970s, you've probably noticed something about yourself that's hard to explain to people who came after you. Maybe you've been told you're too independent, too comfortable with silence, or oddly unbothered by things that stress others out. You might feel like you process the world differently, and here's what psychology wants you to know: you're not imagining it. Your childhood shaped your neural pathways in ways that are profoundly different from later generations. The unsupervised summers, the analog world, the absence of constant stimulation, all of it rewired how your brain approaches problems, relationships, and uncertainty itself. In this video, we explore the 5 rare neurological traits that define the 70s childhood brain. If you've ever been called too detached, overly self-reliant, or strangely calm in chaos, you're about to understand why. These aren't flaws in your personality. They're adaptations that gave you cognitive advantages most people today will never develop. Your brain has what neuropsychologists call exceptional distress tolerance. Here's what's happening in your brain: growing up without immediate rescue, constant supervision, or instant solutions forced your developing prefrontal cortex to build robust emotional regulation circuits. When you fell off your bike 3 blocks from home with no cell phone to call for help, your brain had to solve the problem independently. When you were bored for hours with nothing but your thoughts, your neural networks learned to generate internal stimulation rather than seeking external dopamine hits. This might show up as an unusual ability to sit with discomfort without immediately trying to fix it or escape it. You might find yourself less reactive in emergencies than people around you, almost eerily calm when things go wrong. While others are panicking about a cancelled flight or a technology failure, you're already mentally problem-solving without the emotional spike. This isn't emotional coldness, and it's not that you don't care. This is sophisticated emotional processing. Psychology calls this affect tolerance, the capacity to experience difficult emotions without becoming dysregulated. Your childhood gave you thousands of micro-experiences in managing distress independently, and those experiences literally built thicker neural insulation in your brain's emotional control centers. What others might call your detachment is actually advanced emotional architecture. You possess what cognitive scientists identify as analog processing capacity. Here's what's happening in your brain: you spent your formative years in a world that required sequential, linear attention. Reading a physical book, following a TV show with no rewind button, navigating with paper maps, these activities trained your brain for sustained, uninterrupted focus. Your neural pathways developed what's called deep attention rather than hyperattention, meaning your brain can maintain concentration on complex tasks without the constant stimulation breaks that digital natives require. This might show up as an ability to read long-form content without feeling restless, or to engage in projects that take hours without checking your phone. You might find yourself genuinely confused by why others need background noise or multiple screens operating simultaneously. When you're focused on something, you're fully in it, not because you're trying hard, but because your brain was wired during an era when divided attention wasn't an option. This isn't old-fashioned thinking or inability to multitask. This is rare cognitive endurance. Psychology calls this sustained attention capacity, and it's declining measurably in each subsequent generation. Your brain built neural highways for deep work before the internet fragmented attention into shallow processing. What others might call your intensity or your tendency to disappear into tasks is actually a neurological advantage that's becoming increasingly rare and valuable in a world drowning in distraction. Your nervous system demonstrates what developmental psychologists call earned autonomy. Here's what's happening in your brain: being given independence before you necessarily felt ready activated your brain's self-efficacy networks earlier and more intensely than later generations. When you were sent outside to be back by dinner, with no tracking device and no structured activities, your hippocampus, the brain's navigation and memory center, had to create sophisticated internal maps and decision-making protocols. Your brain learned that you could handle uncertainty because you had to handle it regularly. This might show up as an unusual comfort with solitude, or an ability to entertain yourself without external input. You might find yourself less anxious about being alone or about making decisions without consensus. While others are texting friends for opinions about minor choices, you've already decided and moved on. You don't need constant connection to feel secure. This isn't antisocial behavior or dismissiveness toward others. This is neurological self-sufficiency. Psychology calls this internal locus of control, the belief that you're the primary agent in your life rather than external forces. Your childhood experiences of independent problem-solving built neural pathways that assume your own competence first. What others might call your aloofness or your independence is actually a secure attachment to your own capability, something many people spend years in therapy trying to develop. You've developed what neuropsychologists call experiential learning dominance. Here's what's happening in your brain. Growing up without internet research, instructional videos, or instant expert access meant your brain had to learn through direct trial and error. This activated your procedural memory systems, the neural networks that store physical, hands-on knowledge, far more than your declarative memory systems, which store facts you're told. Your brain expects to learn by doing, by messing up, by figuring things out through direct sensory feedback rather than through verbal instruction. This might show up as a tendency to just try things rather than researching them first, or an impatience with lengthy explanations when you'd rather just get started. You might find yourself more comfortable with initial failure because your brain knows that's part of the learning process. While others are watching tutorials and reading reviews, you've already attempted the task and adjusted based on what happened. This isn't recklessness or lack of preparation. This is kinesthetic intelligence. Psychology calls this embodied cognition, learning that happens through physical interaction with the world rather than abstract instruction. Your brain built strong connections between action and outcome because every lesson came through direct experience. What others might call your impulsiveness or your resistance to instructions is actually a sophisticated learning system that trusts sensory feedback over secondhand information. Your brain exhibits what developmental neuroscience identifies as boredom resilience. Here's what's happening in your brain. Growing up with limited entertainment options and long stretches of unstimulated time forced your default mode network, the brain system active during rest, to develop rich internal activity. When you were bored, your brain learned to generate its own narrative, imagination, and problem solving rather than seeking external stimulation. This built what neuroscientists call strong intrinsic motivation networks. This might show up as an ability to be alone with your thoughts without feeling anxious or a capacity to find interest in seemingly mundane situations. You might find yourself less dependent on entertainment and more able to create your own engagement with the world. While others are scrolling to avoid the discomfort of empty time, you're comfortable letting your mind wander. This isn't laziness or lack of ambition. This is cognitive self-generation. Psychology calls this intrinsic motivation, the ability to create drive and interest from internal sources rather than requiring external rewards or stimulation. Your brain developed powerful daydreaming and creative thinking networks because it had to. What others might call your contentment with simplicity or your lack of need for constant activity is actually a rare form of mental autonomy that most people today struggle to access. If you've ever been called too independent, oddly calm, or disconnected from modern life, now you understand what's really happening. Your 70s childhood didn't just give you memories, it gave you a fundamentally different neural architecture. The truth is that your brain built capacities for sustained attention, emotional regulation, independent learning, and internal motivation that are increasingly rare in a hyper-connected world. These aren't relics of a bygone era. They're advantages. Subscribe for more psychology insights that explain who you really are and why your brain works the way it does.